The danger then is that you've got to remember to unmute if you are called for a question. Okay, we're up to 45. We need to start because of prompts. So good morning all. Welcome to Wychavon Business Rate Breakfast Meeting. Unfortunately, no bacon butties available at the back of the room as we normally would, but hopefully you've managed to get your coffee and are ready for a good meeting. I'm Richard Morris, Councillor Richard Morris. I'm Deputy Leader at Wychavon and portfolio holder for economy and tourism. We've had a terrific registration, so people are going to be coming in, I guess, as we start, as they get organised. We're expecting over 120. I think we're nigh on 50 at the moment. From businesses of all shapes and sizes and all different types of businesses as well. We know coming up to March last year, blimey, if we can cast our minds back, what a wonderful time that was up to March last year. We had one of the fastest growing economies in the country in this area, and what a difference a year can make. We fully understand and truly empathise with the difficulties this year has given to you all, and hope today will be informative and provide you some answers and hopefully some assurances moving forward. So just before we start the agenda, there's some important housekeeping. So as I said, please keep your calls on mute so that we don't get background noise. That would be helpful. And as a reminder, if you click into your screen, mute is on the bottom left, the stop video, and the mute, bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Please allow presenters to impart information and save any questions to the end. But we know that questions will come up as we progress, and I would imagine a lot of you are interested in the grants that we will talk about as well as the Brexit and the Green Agenda. Questions can be written in chat. For those of you that are unaware, if you click into your screen again, you'll see chat in the middle. You can click on chat and then type in your question. If you type in the question, we will assure you that you will get a written response as soon as we can. But we may not cover your question during the time of the meeting, but you will get a written response. However, as you will see from the agenda, there is Q&A at the end of the meeting. And if you raise your blue hand, then we will try and cover those questions in the meeting. So the blue hand is clicking into participants, and then you will see a raised blue hand. So it's blue hand if you want your question within the meeting, and if you're happy for a written response, into the chat, just so that we can manage the number of questions we may have and give you quality information after the meeting as well. We will try and keep to time and to the set agenda. The session is being recorded because we will want to share it, and we want to ensure that we capture all the questions that come up as well. So to start the proceedings, I welcome our first speakers. You may remember that during the year, unfortunately, Jack Hegarty, our Chief Executive, retired. So I'd like to welcome our new Chief Executive, Vic Allison, and our brilliant leader, Bradley Thomas. So over to you, Vic and Bradley.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's a bit of a double act between myself and Bradley, but I'm going to do the first couple of slides, and then Bradley will take over. So just next slide, please. So, you know, we obviously will talk about COVID quite a lot this morning, and just headlines in terms of the story as it affects Wychavon so far. So the first thing to note is we have since Christmas seen a dramatic increase in infection rates across the country, and Worcestershire and Wychavon certainly no exception to that. Over the past few days, we are recognising somewhat of a plateau in terms of new infection rates. So that seems to be holding rather than continuing to increase. That's the rates per 100,000, which you quite often see on the news and the media. But that's doesn't mean we're out of the woods by any stretch, because they are holding at fairly high rates. and we do know that that will have an impact on the NHS, and we're expecting the next week or two to be particularly difficult for our NHS partners. So some plateauing in the infection rates, but certainly doesn't mean we're out of the woods just yet. In terms of what we've done as a council, many of you will recognise the business support grants that's been paid out, and in total, we'll say a bit more about this later, but in total, since the start of the pandemic, we've paid out in the region of £34 million to businesses in Wychavon, which is a huge amount of money if you think about it. I mean, our economic development colleagues wouldn't see that sort of payments to businesses over an entire career, and that's been paid out in the last 10 or 11 months or so. On the housing side, we was encouraged, instructed probably, to help those rough sleepers to get off the streets, because that wouldn't have been too helpful in terms of the pandemic and their vulnerability. So we did manage to accommodate 39 people who were sleeping rough at the start of the pandemic, and the good news is that they, in the vast majority of those rough sleepers, do stay in more permanent accommodation going forward, and an ambition of ours is to keep it that way going forwards into the longer term. On council tax support, we've given additional support to 847 households in the district. We've provided support with our county council partners through the Here to Help scheme for those most vulnerable and needing assistance during this period. In addition to business grants, we've supported our voluntary sector partners, and that includes financial assistance of over £100,000 to our food banks, who have done an absolutely tremendous job supporting the poorer families and most vulnerable people in the district throughout the period. Which was successful in getting some government funding channeled through the local enterprise partnership, £600,000 towards new business units currently being constructed at our land on Vale Park. You will be aware that we've been communicating with businesses quite regularly throughout, and residents too. Delighted to say we've maintained our essential services, so no disruption to the key council services. They carried on, and it's credit to our colleagues in FCC and other contractors who have maintained refuse collection and so on throughout the period. The impact on us through lost income and additional expenditure this financial year, is over £2 million, and that's against the £11 million net budget. The good news is the government will fund the vast majority of that through additional support to councils this year. The longer term issue, however, is in terms of business rates and council tax yields going forward. We expect them to be impacted for some years to come, and we need to think about the impact on our own finances as a result of that. We have a recovery plan which was produced around the time of the first lockdown. As it was coming to an end, we started to look forward to see how we could recover as communities and an economy from the COVID pandemic. It's got 4 pillars. They're listed there. The first one, and probably the most significant, is the support for communities and the local economy to recover. But then the others are important as well, which is around getting the council working again, and supporting our councillors and the democracy, and general recovery of the organisation, which has been impacted pretty significantly, as you would expect, throughout the pandemic. Big focus on high streets, local economy and skills, as you would expect. Already we had high streets that were suffering, and that was before the pandemic, so there's a big push on that now. What I will say, just before we get on to this next slide, is that we are having now experienced 3 lockdowns and more significant impacts. We will be reviewing and refreshing that framework to set the targets and actions for the period from now on in, and that revised and refreshed recovery framework will be published over the coming months. I think I'm handing over to Bradley at this point.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Vic. And good morning, everyone. Great to see so many people here to listen to what the council's got to say, and so that we can listen to you. So building upon what Vic has said, we've flicked between recovery and response several times over the course of the last year. And consequently, towards the end of 2020, we had a mini peer review take place looking at Wychavon's response and recovery. And this took the form of peers within the sector. So the chief executive of Cheltenham Borough Council and the leader of Sedgemoor down in Somerset, supported by local government professionals, assessing how Wychavon has approached the economic recovery as we emerge from the pandemic. And you can see a few highlights there on the screen in front of you. So the overall message was very positive for Wychavon, that we've responded in a pragmatic way, that we've been very comprehensive and effective, not just in terms of the economy. The focus was predominantly on the economy, but in terms of supporting our community, the vulnerable residents, and all of those who may turn to the district council at a time of acute need. And all of this practical and pragmatic approach has effectively been underpinned by Wychavon's strong financial resilience. And you'll hear quite a bit more about that from Jane a little bit later on this morning. But Wychavon, towards the end of 2020, was deemed by Grant Thornton to be the most financially resilient district council in England. And that stands us in very good stead as we move on to thinking about what the long-term economic strategy will be for our district. And that final point there on the screen, I think for me, that's the big outcome of this recovery panel. Collectively with the peers who assessed us, we identified that district councils, and it's not just Wychavon, I think it's across the board, district councils are very good at focusing on the short-term economic strategy and goals that we want to achieve. And we're probably not as good, or haven't been as good in the immediate past, at looking at the longer term economic vision. That's partly because we're not the sole responsible stakeholders for that. We've got the county council, we've got the LEP, we've got businesses themselves. And so a key piece of work for us over the next 12 months will be to work with our partners, to engage with businesses, to engage with the community, and think about what kind of economy we want to create in the future, and looking out sort of 10, 15 years plus, thinking about the role of things like agritech in the southern part of the district, where we've got that that agricultural activity, thinking about the impact of AI and technology in that manufacturing band that arcs around Droitwich and the northern part of the district. And as Vic said, all of this is underpinned by a focus on our town centres as well. Next slide, please. Okay, you can see here a few of our other priorities. So COVID hit, yes, it did become the sole focus of most of our work, but that didn't mean that the rest of the business of the council stopped. As Vic said, essential services continued, and that meant that the council focused on other priorities too. And you can see there that we adopted a new 4-year strategy for the council that covers the period 2020 to 24. We approved it just before lockdown. And some of you who've been engaged in these business forums before will know that we had 3 former priorities, which were people, place, and prosperity. And we tweaked those ever so slightly. So we've got supporting people, which I think underpins everything that we do, particularly in a post-pandemic landscape. We've seen how we've supported the vulnerable residents. We've got that strong economy at the core, because it's you guys who deliver the bulk of our employment and the prosperity within the district. And then we've got sustainable environment too, which recognises the need for decarbonisation and the opportunities to grow that low carbon economy as well. And this strategy is effectively containing 12 goals and 35 promises. And we've done an assessment of the strategy, which effectively says, you know, we think we can continue to deliver this. It's largely unaffected by COVID, but of course, you know, everything is reassessed, you know, as the pandemic continues. Next slide, thanks. Okay, so just a few of the promises, and this builds upon the success that Vic outlined a few slides ago. So we're continuing to invest in major new employment at Vale Park and Worcester 6, with both of those being quite key strategic sites to support growing businesses. We've got the Wychavon Business Hub due to come online at the Civic Centre. So this is utilising some of the vacant space in the downstairs part of the Pershore head office for the council, and it will be a venue for small businesses that are probably looking to get out of bedrooms and perhaps sheds, garages, things like that, to sort of go into their first bit of commercial premises where there'll be some wraparound support to enable them to access business services, grants, that kind of knowledge that the public sector can provide. A focus on grants to encourage small and medium-sized businesses to take on apprentices, and we've done a fair bit of work on this in recent years, thanks to our skills and apprentice officer, Sue Owens. Linked to decarbonisation, £100,000 to promote growth of the low carbon economy. We're well aware at Wychavon that in terms of intelligently green and decarbonisation, our role is actually somewhat limited. There's only so much that we can do directly in terms of minimizing the carbon intensity of our own footprint, and much of that we've done already. So a key focus for us is on how we influence and support businesses and the local economy as you undergo that transition to become more agile in your use of energy and master plans for the 3 towns. So quite a few of you may be aware of these. We've spoken about them for a while, and this has been a slow burning promise, but one where we're starting to make traction now. For Droitwich, Pershore and Evesham, we've pledged £50,000 for each town to create a vision that articulates the future of those town centres. And we want to be absolutely clear, these are not planning documents. This is thinking about the type of economic activity that we want to see, that we need to see in our town centres to keep them vibrant and relevant. And we've recently appointed consultants who are beginning this process, and these master plans will guide the future investment that comes into our towns. The SWDP, you'll be aware that each council has to have a development plan. These have to a point been affected by COVID. Ours has been pushed back by around about 12 months, but the government are adamant they want development plans to continue. We want our development plan to continue because it's really important to give local residents, local businesses certainty over development and the kind of development that's taking place and where it's taking place. There's a focus on parking provision at railway stations in particular. And there have been a few good news stories in recent weeks about this, but the council remains committed to working with stakeholders to improve connectivity around railway stations and to ensure that people can get from railway stations into local town centres. And there's a focus from this council on good urban design. And many of you will have heard me talk about this before. This is about more than just bricks and materials. This is about approaching placemaking in a way that captures the economic, the social, the health and well-being aspirations of our residents to ensure that Wychavon remains a great place for people to live, work and invest. And the final 2 points there, we're starting to deliver on the Intelligently Green Plan, the decarbonisation agenda, and I think you're going to hear a little bit more about that this morning. And finally, linked to decarbonisation, linked to urban design and health and well-being, we are working with partners on new cycle routes, and Wychavon has recently appointed our first active travel officer, whose role is to help us unblock some of the channels to make it easier for us to develop and support that active travel infrastructure that will enable people to get around, not just in their cars. Okay, I'll hand over to Chris. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Bradley. Thank you, Vic. It's Richard here. So welcome to anyone who's recently joined. Just a reminder to stay on mute if you can, and to put any questions you have into the chat line or raise your blue hand, and we will get to them as soon as we can. Unfortunately, Chris Brooks is unwell this morning. He's our head of economic development, and I know a lifeline to many of you with the grants that have been paid. But we welcome Phil Merrick, the head of service, in his place. So morning, Phil.
Yes, morning everybody. Thank you for joining us today. First slide really is probably like all of you, we've been bouncing between response, restart, recovery, back to response sort of phases. So I think that will be familiar for many of you. So move the slide on, please, Tracy. So back in March, in the spring and so on, as a team and working particularly with Civica, I have to say our business rates team contractor Civica have been working really well with council officers to actually help with the business support program on this. So, you know, it seems a long time ago now, but we had the ability of providing £10,000 grants for any business with a business rates rateable value below £15,000, plus for retail, hospitality or leisure businesses a £25,000 straight grant. So that we've been, it was quite an active period because, as you're probably familiar, we're an organisation that's used to taking money off of businesses and not paying businesses. So we had the issue of having bank details for businesses and not having that on our records and so on. So it was a busy spring period really of us doing the trying to contact businesses, hopefully some of you, to actually find those details out. And we did get some quite surprised responses to the question, I'm from the council, I want to pay you some money. So I can understand there being some head scratching on that, but I'm pleased to say that we were able to get just over £31 million out to businesses from those programmes. In addition to that, we had a top-up grant available, again, mainly for the leisure sector for 1.48 million. So a very busy period there. Delighted that we were able to provide hopefully lifelines for many businesses. Next slide, please. We kind of had hoped that over the summer that we might not be quite so active on the grant side sort of going forward, but clearly lockdown 2 in November, we were again allocated funding from the government to get funding out. So I think these slides are just hopefully give you a feel for the level of reach and volumes of businesses that have been supported from it. So the local restrictions grants were for businesses that were required to close during the lockdown. So very much the retail, hospitality, leisure sectors that the government required to close. So we were able to get for the November scheme 1.6 million pounds out to 1,100 businesses on that. The government also had what's known as the additional restrictions grant, and that's a little bit of a fund that's a flexible funds for local authorities to manage. I might be out of order in saying this. I think this was to help local MPs who are probably being contacted by many businesses like yourself, sort of saying we fall outside of the government grants criteria on this, but we are in need. Can you help us? So effectively the government gave the local authorities some funding to actually develop our own local program. So unfortunately it's not big enough for us to support every business from every business sector. But we developed a scheme which was really focused on those businesses that were part of the supply chain for the leisure, hospitality, retail sector. So far we've been, this slide slightly out of date. Chris has informed me that £400,000 has been paid out to some 300 businesses now through that scheme, and that scheme is still live. And is relevant for November 20. We've also had confirmation from the government that there will be a similar funding programme for the current lockdown, and effectively it's funding again for the retail, hospitality, leisure sectors that have been told to close. We will be payments have already started to go out on that particular scheme. For the January, and businesses that got the local restrictions grant back in November don't have to apply. We will roll those payments out, and as I say, that has actually started going out the door. We also got an addition to the additional restrictions grant, and we have got discussions in the next day or two, and hopefully those payments will be imminent as well. My little message on that is you may be familiar with this, is that often we'll get a government announcement, but it might take several weeks before we get the details of the schemes. So you won't be surprised to hear that generally we won't release funding without knowing what the details and requirements of the scheme is. But I think through those response phases so far, quite a lot of money is got out to a lot of businesses. Next slide. So back in the summer, working with our partners, and I have to say across Worcestershire, we've had brilliant cooperation in information exchange, working together between different agencies. So from the Chamber of Commerce to the FSB, through to the County Council, the LEP. We've had regular phone calls. So back in the spring last year, there were twice a week exchanges of information in awareness of what was going on. We currently sort of fortnightly discussions, and as part of that, we kind of have developed a restart and recovery plan back in September. Tracy, move it along, please. Those covers 7 priority areas. Business intelligence. It's again as businesses, you probably will get requests for supplying information on what's happening to your business to the LEP and the Chamber of Commerce, so that we can get a good measure of really sort of the levels of challenges I think you as business communities have got. So that will continue, and the LEP will be doing more of that in the coming weeks on that. Information for businesses, so again probably through Worcestershire Business Central, trying to provide business support, particularly online training and advice services through the period of COVID. Business support, some of the grant programs we've talked about. There's also various other programs such as business startup courses, because certainly what we do know is when you have periods of major upheaval in increases on unemployment, is actually people do start up in business. So those courses have continued through this period. Transport and infrastructure, really that was very much a drive to make sure that highways, transport projects were not held up for as long as for the shortest period only, so that we would get the emphasis of getting projects up and running, partly to helps in terms of construction contracts and jobs and skills, but it obviously gives confidence hopefully for the business community going forward. I think one of those projects, particularly in the Wychavon areas, is the Bin Crossroads work back in the autumn and winter. Now completed, and hopefully the works for the long-awaited Pershore Northern Link Road should be starting shortly as well on that. Employment and skills, again a lot of effort from County Council and other colleagues with doing things like online career services, and trying to match those businesses that are looking to recruit with people looking for work, etc. So quite a lot of emphasis on online support on that. Large amount of work undertaken on town centres, recovery work. So we were able to get some funding from the government, that we've had town centre recovery officers that have been working with businesses in the town centres, when those businesses could open, help to promote them, raise awareness, encourage local shopping activities and so on, and of course free car parking that still exists in the town. And then likewise on the tourism sector, we certainly had a boost back in the summer in terms of staycations and demand for particularly self-catering accommodation in the locality, and we work together as Worcestershire really to promote those opportunities. And I think the work is being prepared really for when this current lockdown finishes, hopefully not too long away, that we think there will be a strong staycation sort of move for the spring and summer of this year. So we need to make the most of that. Next slide, please. So Wychavon, I think been sort of covered to a large degree. I think one area, some areas to sort of focus on is that a lot of the business startup courses, because the way they've been funded by European funding, they've been very much focused on business to business type new startups, rather than business to consumers bit. That's all to do with competition issues and so on. And what Whichaven is with other partners is decided to do is top up the startup training and support program in Worcestershire, so that we can make sure that we do capture people that are looking to do business to consumer. So that may well be people looking to set up in shop retail, or people doing online retail operations, etc. So, you know, hopefully a wider program of support available on that. We do have a fund allocated for when we are back into full recovery stage to support businesses adapt to take advantage of adapt their businesses to take advantage of opportunities going forward. We've made a commitment to extend our town centre recovery officers, so that the government funding is till the end of March. We will fund that to at least the end of August of this year. And as mentioned, we are developing a business hub at the Civic Centre. We've added to the budget, so it's 150,000 actually being spent on the business hub to improve the quality of the offer there. Next slide. Apprenticeships, we had made a commitment prior to COVID to increase our apprenticeship grants and offer bursaries, really, so that businesses or individuals, apprentices who might be requiring a bit of support with travel arrangements or buying tools, equipment, clothing, etc., that we've got a top-up grant. So as Richard mentioned earlier, Sue Owens, our skills officer, is even through COVID been promoting those initiatives. So again, you know, hopefully you as business community will hear more about that. And then wider is this joint working really with Worcestershire Business Central in Worcestershire County Council to provide a fairly comprehensive support system for businesses. Next slide. Restart, you know, I think we have to look forward, and it's been a challenging year, no doubt about that. But you know, what never ceases to amaze us really is the fact that we do have many resilient businesses, and people have changed their business models through the last 9 months or so. And you know, we are confident that our diverse business base hopefully will give us some springboard really going forward on it. But we do recognise there's massive challenges out there. To say we've got £100,000 grant scheme that's not launched at the moment, and I think we will wait for the recovery phase to kick in to support businesses with that change. And clearly, I think we all look forward to the vaccination programme being comprehensive, so that we can get back to some sort of normality. And you know, I think there is that genuine hope and belief. I think I share it, and I'm sure we do as individuals, is when we are able to go back out again, we look forward to using our local shops and our local pubs and restaurants, etc. So we need to support our local businesses to make the most of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Phil, there's been a couple of questions. Can you just clarify that lockdown 3 grants are imminent, or support
yes,
for businesses?
Is yes, and lockdown 3 grants payments already started to go out on that. So so that's actually happening. So if you're able to get lockdown 2 grants, then automatically those payments will be going out. I think a check run was started on the weekend. So there's usually 2-3 days backlog from it leaving our bank account to actually going into businesses' accounts.
Yeah, there's a large administration job, and the team have done fantastic in supporting. But people don't need to apply. It's automatic based on lockdown 2 that they'll get lockdown 3.
Yes.
But we are looking at additional restrictions, and that will be in the business news as soon as we get a green light on further payments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you for the questions in chat. Please keep them coming. They will be answered in written format, if not during the session. We're now passing on to Mark Armitage, who's the Director of International Trade at the Chamber of Commerce, to talk about the other issue, and we have some larger businesses on the call as well, to do with Brexit. So morning, Richard.
Morning, Richard. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Next slide, please, Tracy. what I'd like to do this morning is talk through the international trade support that we can deliver out of the Chamber, both from the government's Department for International Trade and also our own Chamber International Trade Commercial Services team. Tracy, next slide, please. And then what I want to do is move on to some more specific EU exit support for businesses of all sizes, whether they're new to export, more experienced, larger corporates, or micro businesses. Next slide, please, Tracy. Just to give a bit of an outline of the international trade support that we supply out of the Chamber, and I think you might be quite surprised at this. It is pretty extensive. I manage two teams, one of which is the Department for International Trade team, and there are now 6 of us working out of the Chamber. We cover, as I say, larger corporates in terms of support, as well as MSBs, medium-sized businesses, and, as I say, novice and experienced exporters. DIT provide normally and mainly more market-facing support, and I'll go into a little bit of that detail because it's part of the EU exit support as well. Market-facing meaning supporting companies getting into new territories, looking at markets, digital support, IP support, contractual, and so on. Very much, as I say, getting a business out there in the first instance and giving it the brand support as well. And then we have another team, what I would describe as being the engine room. So that's supporting companies, and this is critical, of course, in EU exit support, getting goods from A to B. So looking at their documentation, looking at compliance, whether that's import or export. Next slide, please, Tracy. Just a quick overview of some of the Department for International Trade support. There's a lot of it. I'm not going to go through it all, but a lot of it is free of charge. And the advisors would initially come out to look at a business who haven't interacted with DIT before, carry out a business diagnostic, and understand where there are areas of support that we can offer through the Department for International Trade. And that could be anything through operations, marketing, it could be logistics, and so on. And from that diagnostic, we would look to input some of the services I've listed there. I think one of the key strengths, though, of the Department for International Trade is its access to over 120 commercial offices across the world. That's the embassy, commercial sections of the British Embassy. So overnight, the smallest of businesses in Worcestershire can be patched into the local commercial team of all of those countries. And we do it on a very regular basis. And of course, with COVID, we're now doing it even more, actually, through Teams, through Zoom, and it's a pretty strong advantage for any business to get that reach that they need, and particularly with domestic markets closing down as they are. So that access to a global network, and that opens up into other services as well that we deliver, national webinars, virtual exhibitions from across the world, different sectors, masterclasses for companies on a one-to-one basis, ensuring they've got the language and cultural aspects of their marketing proposition correct, for example. Crucially, digital trade, a lot of work around digital marketing and how we can support businesses getting their brand out virtually through a screen. Market selection, market research, where to go, in-depth sector support, defense and security, export finance and grants available as well. So quite a range and portfolio of services, mainly free of charge to businesses across both Herefordshire and Worcestershire. Next slide, please, Tracy. The second team within the Chamber is a team, as I say, which is more the back-end support for businesses, the logistical, getting stuff from A to B. We completed last year for export clients over 6,500 worth of X sets of documentation for clients. We also run virtually international trade training courses and have a portfolio of 25 of those, working in conjunction with probably the best international trade training consultant in the country, a company called Strong & Herb based in Manchester. We also do translation services, legalization, authentication of documents as well. So the real nuts and bolts support for businesses getting stuff products from A to B. Next slide, please, Tracy. So looking at what we're doing more specifically around EU exit support, in addition to Department for International Trade, and as I say, businesses are welcome to come into us through or to access that support. We also have or have had monies from Worcestershire County Council to set up more specific EU exit support. And they sort of form, well, there are 4 key areas of that. First of all, training for businesses, and I'll talk a little bit about that. EU exit advisory, not just signposting to websites, but actually one-to-one advice. I'll go into some of that detail. And crucially, EU exit support for customs declarations. Lastly, we have an EU exit site on the Chamber website, a hub where businesses can access all of the information I'm going to talk about. So next slide, please, Tracy. The EU exit contract training. I mentioned that we normally in our training portfolio for international trade would have probably between 20, 25 courses running and be delivering 4 or 5 of those every month of the year. But what we did for EU exit in September last year was strip that back and actually focused on 5 key areas that we thought businesses would need to know. Overnight on the 31st of December, businesses, whether they knew it or not, were becoming net exporters or net importers. A lot of businesses have been trading with the EU or EU for the last 15, 16 years of the single market, wouldn't have had any paperwork to do, wouldn't have any preparations to make import or export. It would just go straight into that single market, that customs union. But of course, overnight, the situation changed. So what we did is we looked at developing 5 courses that would give companies very quickly the information they needed to actually start importing or exporting from a standing start. And the 5 courses we chose was something called a Brexit checklist, which is a basic overview of all the different areas where EU exit will affect a business. And that's not just the process of getting goods from A to B. That's also things like HR, certification, travel. The second one was export documentation, import documentation, and then import and export customs declarations. Next slide, please, Tracy. So the Brexit checklist I've spoken about, the basic export and basic import documentation, as I've listed there, it's a review to get companies started, to get them to understand exactly what they need in terms of export-import documents. I made mention of the fact that literally overnight, there are companies who have become net importers, net exporters, and who are now having to complete paperwork that they've never had to do previously. Next slide, please, Tracy. One of the biggest areas is around declarations, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but this is going to be really important. Prior to EU exit, HMRC had 100 million export declarations. Subsequent to Brexit, over the next year, that figure will increase by another 300 million because of the extra paperwork that businesses will now need to complete in order to bring their goods in or get their goods out. So 2 very important courses there, import customs declaration and export customs declarations. Next slide, please, Tracy. EU exit contract advisory. What we have done on the website is not only list areas of businesses or the parts of organizations that will need support, but we've also put in a lot of very relevant links to where businesses can get help from HMRC, from the government, and so on. In addition, we have also procured something called a one-call service. So for more complex international trade inquiries, we can actually set up a meeting, a virtual meeting with a consultant to actually go through that complex inquiry in more detail. And then across the 2 teams that I have, we have, oh, the slides have moved. Tracy, sorry. We also have across the 2 teams, international trade advisors and other members of the teams who can provide, if you like, more basic advice before we move on to the more in-depth advice. Next slide, please, Tracy. I mentioned customs declarations, and I mentioned the fact that this has become an enormous issue. The British Chambers of Commerce about 24 months ago spotted this, and what we as a chamber organisation have done, have put in place something called the Chamber Customs Service. And what this is a service that we will deliver out of the chamber to support businesses with their customs declarations. There was a deal, obviously, on the 24th of December this year, but it didn't matter whether we got the tariff agreement in place or the quota agreement. There were still going to be customs declarations to be done by businesses. And customs declarations are important for HMRC because they provide all sorts of information, customs value, tariffs, and so on. And as I mentioned earlier, in addition to the 50 to 100 million that were being completed before Brexit, there are now going to be an extra 270 million additional documents required by HMRC for import or export of goods over the next 12 months. Next slide, please, Tracy. So what did we do through Worcestershire County Council? We have got financial support for recruitment of a dedicated customs declarations exec. We're going to recruit 2 more people as well, in addition to the training of our existing team, so that we can deliver this service from the Chamber of Commerce. Next slide, please. So how are we bringing it all together? We have a web hub on the site specifically dedicated to EU-Exit. We're also putting out adverts in our Business Direction magazine, as well as a continuous digital marketing campaign, so that companies, small businesses, larger businesses can get access to the information that we're talking about. Next slide, please. We have a couple more seminars planned, one on the 9th of February, which is going to look at more in depth at some of the more typical issues that are being faced by businesses, and particularly those areas that perhaps are missing from the existing EU-UK trade agreement that was set up, and how companies can overcome some of the problems that they're now facing. There's going to be another seminar as well, set up in March, which will also have by then identified some of the bigger issues which we can talk through with businesses. Next slide, please. So what we've done through this support is actually, we hope, given more in-depth support. Part of the of what we wanted to do was not just signpost businesses, but actually give more granular support in terms of one-to-one over the phone answers to quite complex international trade queries, and also crucially giving businesses the wherewithal to be able to do the job themselves, so via the training. And then, of course, we're continually updating the site with supplementary information from the government, from the Department for International Trade, British Chambers of Commerce, Institute of Export, and so on. And in addition to this EU-Exit support, we also have the support of the Department for International Trade. So if there is something more trade related, we can always, through the chamber, through the DIT team there, get in touch with the central government, Department for International Trade there. The marketing campaign we've done, we think, we hope, is getting into what I would say the nooks and crannies of the local business community, so that we can offer up as much support as we can for businesses. And what I would ask in the first instance, though, is companies visit the site and understand a little bit more about the problem before contacting us directly. Because, as you can imagine, we have had a tsunami of inquiries over the last couple of weeks, and the inquiries are growing. So what we're advocating, hoping businesses will do, is really a bit of self-learning. Brexit covers, EU exit covers different parts of businesses. It may be the shipping and logistics, which is the obvious part, but it could also be HR, access to people because of the now restrictive freedom of movement across the EU. It could also be other organizational issues and contracts, of course, which will change as well. Certification requirements. So Brexit has thrown up all sorts of different areas that businesses need to investigate in order to ensure that they're ready. So the advice is please look at the site, understand which part of your business needs specific support before contacting us so that we can hopefully support you in a more efficient and effective way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that informative session, and hopefully it allays some fears. But as you say, they need to go to the site first and then ask any questions after. But if there are any immediate, please put them into chat. We're a little behind on time, so I'm going to move briskly on to Matthew Barker, Carbon Reduction Project Officer, to talk through intelligently green carbon reduction. So good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, if we go to next slide, please. So yeah, I might as well go to the next one as well. Sorry. Thank you. So yeah, as mentioned, my name's Matt Barker. I'm the Carbon Reduction Officer for Wychavon, as well as Malvern Hills District also. And I'm in post to facilitate the delivery of the Council's Intelligently Green Plan, which is the Council's action plan for reducing carbon, its own emissions as well as the emissions of the wider district. So today I was just going to sort of give you the highlights of what is within the Intelligently Green Plan in terms of its vision and targets, but then specifically touch on the low carbon economy element of that, as well as then looking at some specific business funding opportunities in the area of sustainability and business energy efficiency. So firstly, in terms of the vision, so three key components to it. First being that to lead Wychavon District to be carbon neutral as quickly as possible and by 2050 at the latest. But then to also make the most of those opportunities that we have through tackling climate change to grow and strengthen our local economy. And then to increase and support the range of habitats that are within the district to help with carbon capture, but also to increase our biodiversity. Next slide, please. So then on to the specific targets. Target 1 is to reduce the District Council's own greenhouse gas emissions by at least 75% in 2030. Now, major areas of the council's own emissions come from its buildings, particularly the leisure centres being the greatest component, as well as the civic centre itself, but also our waste and street cleaning operations. So there's a lot of work to be done to continue the reduction emissions that have already been occurring on those own buildings. Next, please. Target 2 then is to look at the emissions that are beyond the council's own operations and look at the wider district emissions. And the target is to halve those emissions by 2030. Now those emissions come from three key areas: transport, domestic properties, as well as industrial and commercial activities. So it's looking at how the council can facilitate and aid reductions of emissions in these areas. Next slide, please. Target 3 is to then double the size of Wychavon's low carbon economy, and again, how the council can play a part in achieving that. Next slide, please. Target 4, and sort of linked to the low carbon economy, is around trebling the amount of renewable energy generation in the district in 2030. As you can see from the chart at the bottom right hand of the slide, there has been quite an increase in growth over recent years, particularly in solar photovoltaics, as well as energy from waste. Next slide, please. And then finally, on target 5 is to capture at least 500 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per year by 2025. And that's just through restoring and enhancing, creating a range of habitats across the district, which of course also has important co-benefits in terms of biodiversity, leisure opportunities, as well as opportunities for the economy as well. Next slide, please. So specifically on the low carbon economy, according to the Office of National Statistics in 2018, the size of the low carbon economy equated to over £46 billion worth of turnover and over 100,000 full-time equivalent jobs. But it's also predicted that the low carbon economy could grow by an estimated 11% per year between 2050 and 2030, which is significantly faster than the rest of the UK economy. And quite importantly, there's predictions that the growth could be really significant in this part of the economy, both in terms of the value and the amount of jobs that it could support, which really sort of highlights the opportunity that is there, not only for the country, but for Wychhaven to play its part in that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there is a target within the Intelligent Green Plan of doubling the size of the low carbon economy and trebling the amount of renewable energy generation. But there's also a specific action within the plan for the council to invest £100,000 over 4 years to help promote the growth of the economy within Wychhaven. And as part of this, the council is involved in a low carbon economy goods and services sector study, which is sort of a Midlands-wide study over multiple local enterprise partnership areas. And the aim of this really is to understand what the current state of the sector actually is and where sort of the councils might be best placed to help it grow. This study is ongoing at the moment and is due to report back in a month or so's time. But outputs have always suggested that at the moment, the low carbon economy is already worth 1.5 billion to Worcestershire. That's generated by over 700 businesses, employing over 11,000 people. And clearly there's really potential to grow that. On specific business funding opportunities, there's a number of things out there which you'd be able to access. Firstly, the Business Energy Efficiency Programme administered by Worcestershire County Council. And that is around it involves free energy assessments of your equipment, premises, processes and performances to find where there might be opportunities for improvements in energy usage and efficiency. And then from that and from those assessments, there is grants of up to £20,000 or up to 40% of the total cost of the project to help you implement those recommendations. In addition, there's the Low Carbon Opportunities Programme, which sort of falls into two key elements. Firstly, again, there's free assessments to consider the renewable energy generation potential of your business, but also assessments to develop your own low carbon innovation projects around sort of diversification or development of low carbon products and services. And then again, to support the delivery of those sort of recommendations coming from those assessments, there's grants of up to 40% available for capital and revenue projects to assist with that. Next slide, please. There is sort of in the from the national government, the Office of Low Emission Vehicles, there's the Workplace Electric Vehicle Charging Scheme, which offers sort of 75% towards the cost of purchase and installation of electric charging points. And that's up to a maximum of £350 for each socket, up to a maximum of 40 sockets. And then there's the Natural Networks Programme, which is a partnership with the Worcestershire Wildlife Trust. Now, this offers biodiversity surveys from the Worcestershire Wildlife Trust themselves, to advise on how to create and improve your land to maximise wildlife habitats. And again, there's also grants on offer to help carry out those recommendations. Next slide, please. And then just finally, a pointer towards the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Chamber of Commerce and their sustainability forums. There's been 3 sort of forum seminars recently around low carbon energy generation for your business, becoming carbon neutral business, as well as making the switch towards electric vehicles. And those are 3 events that are funded through the Business Energy Efficiency Programme. And these are available to view on the Chamber's YouTube channel for free. And they're certainly really good places to start to sort of gain further, more in-depth information on some of the things I've touched on today, and as well those grants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. We're now on to the business rates update, which would normally be delivered by Rod Urquhart. Unfortunately, Rod's not with us today, but we're very pleased that Dominic Warmley is with us, because Dominic's played a massive role in the business grants going out to you guys as well. So Good morning, Dom, and thank you for taking this session.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to quickly just go through what we do know for this year, and we'll move on to the grants, which is, I would assume, why most people are here to hear about. So, if we just have a quick recap of what we know, which has happened for this year and going into next year. So, what we do know is the Small Business Rates Relief Scheme will continue into next year. I know we're tight for time here, so I won't go into every part of this in detail. We'll go into the grants in more detail. The Enhanced Retail Relief Scheme, which currently is given 100% off your net bill for this financial year, we're still waiting to hear from the government in terms of what will be brought forward for the next financial year. Year 5 and the final year of supported small business schemes, which there is more details on the website for that. Rural settlement relief is going to be going ahead into next year, I believe, with 100% rates relief again. And just finally, the multipliers, which is how your bill is created, and the bill charge will be frozen for the next financial year, which is obviously great news. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what I've done here is try to just give you a sort of overview of the amount of schemes that we've tried to administer since March, which you can see is a pretty hefty amount of grants. And obviously, from our point of view, it's a lot to administer, but from your point of view as well, it's a lot for you to try and understand what you are actually eligible for. So hopefully I can clear that up today for you. The only thing that we won't be focusing on too much is the scheme at the bottom here, which is a discretionary scheme, which I believe Phil touched on briefly. That's the additional restrictions grant, which is available on the website still to apply for. So further eligibility criteria, etc., is on the website. But we'll start from the top scheme. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so very briefly on this one, because I know Phil actually touched on this one. This was the original first lockdown, which was brought in March. Businesses in receipt of small business rates relief obviously got the £10,000 grant, and then we had a further £10,000 to £25,000 grant for retail, hospitality and leisures. That scheme closed for new applications at the end of August. And as it says, we've paid over £31 million out on that scheme. So if we can go to the next scheme.
Good.
Okay, so going more into what we've got available today, and this is still available today. This is the second national lockdown scheme for the period from the 5th of November to the 2nd of December. Businesses forced to close from the 5th of November are eligible for this funding. It's probably worth noting here the way that the rateable values are providing support, because this is basically the thing that will go on for all of the future grant schemes. So you've effectively got a small, a medium and a large business sectors. So you've got the 1334 per 28-day period, the £2,000 and the £3,000. The one important thing to note here, and I think this has probably been lost in a lot of government information, is that businesses such as Click and Collect and pubs that are offering takeaway services but their core business is shut are still eligible for this grant. So obviously, if you are a pub, you're doing a takeaway service, but your core business has to shut, please, apply for this grant. And this remains open, and we are still paying out on this grant scheme. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to try and briefly explain this one for you. This is the tier. If we go to the tier 2 initially, the tier 2 support is broken down into 2 sections of a closed support and an open support. So as the name suggests, businesses that were forced to close, which is, I believe, primarily going to be your pubs, etc., for the 2nd of December through to the 30th of December, would be eligible for further support through tier 2, and then through the 31st of December through to the 4th of January for the tier 3. Again, they're eligible for support again, and this is paid out as listed here under 14-day periods. And then obviously for the period that we were in a pro rata period we were in the tier 2, that will be paid on a pro rata basis, so a 5-day period. If we go to the next slide, please. So those who were able to open during the tier period, but they were severely impacted, there is funding available. This is a discretionary fund, so obviously we do have a limited amount that we can actually spend on this. There are further bits of information and the eligibility criteria on the website. We are actively making payments on both of these tier schemes still. I believe that was one of the questions actually that came up. So just to confirm on that, we are still administering this. We do have a considerable amount of applications that have come in since this began. So we are still paying this out, and that is open for new applications again still. So if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the wet led pubs, £1,000 payable to anyone who derives less than 50% of their income through food, and they're within a tier 2 and 3 restrictions, eligible for £1,000 payments. We have further information on the website, and we are still paying that out up until final applications on the 29th of January. Just quickly on the local restrictions sector scheme, we've only actually got, I believe, so far one eligible nightclub within Wychavon. So I don't think there's much need to go further into that. But obviously, again, information will be available on the website should you require that. And everybody within these tier schemes and the sector schemes will be included within the national schemes once we move into a national scheme. So if we can just go to the next slide, please. Okay. So probably the most important one for everybody today. The new national schemes, I think it's been touched on briefly before, but we have started making payments to those who receive this the November lockdown payments, and we without the need to apply, we've made immediate payments already. We will continue to do so. We are in the middle at the moment of updating our website. So what we are looking at doing is basically doing one super form as such, so you don't have to go into different selections for every scheme that's come available. So you will be able to just complete one form, tick a box basically that you believe you're eligible for, and we can get that all in one and capture all that in one. So just going into the schemes very quickly, basically there's 2 levels of support that have become available. There is a 6-week payment which will run from the 5th of January, I believe, through to the 15th of January. And that would be paid again, as I mentioned before, in the small, medium and large businesses will get the grant accordingly. In addition to that, so that is, you know, these payments are collective, you will also receive a one-off grant payment of the £4,600 and the £9,000. We will be getting an application form live for this. So if you haven't been included in the November payments, or you feel like you've missed out on that, you will, you know, be able to apply for that. So hopefully that settles anybody's fears that they won't be included into this. Obviously, we've got a large number of applications that will be coming in as per previous schemes, so we'll be doing everything we can to get these paid as soon as possible. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, and then just finally, as we would normally look at, e-billing is still available for anybody, and maybe an option for people this year more than ever that can't actually access their properties, available for sign up via our website. Explanatory notes on the council's website. Payment options are as usual, and self-service is there again for anybody who wishes to sign up to that. If we can go to the next option slide, please. Okay, so yeah, just finally sort of recapping, and hopefully I've managed to capture the majority of questions that came up in the sidebar, but as it was mentioned previously, I'm happy to answer any queries that have come up that I haven't answered. one of the big things here is that we're still waiting for guidance on the retail scheme. So hopefully we will get that out and we'll put that on our website as soon as we possibly know any further information. We have a small team.
That was you, isn't it? Is that plus that?
Oh, okay.
It's £100. Is speak to him.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Could you mute,
I
please?
think go for it.
Excuse me.
If he's available,
Yeah.
it's painful otherwise, isn't it? It's a lot of money though, isn't it?
Just signing off on that. We're happy to help. Obviously, we are dealing with a large amount of correspondence at the moment, but we want to make sure that everybody is getting the payments that they are due. So please, by all means, contact us via our email address or telephone number, which is all available on the website. So we are here to help. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dom, and thank you for your support. It is fairly complex, and we try and distill it and make it simpler, although I do appreciate sometimes it is still quite confusing with so much going on to everyone. Please keep your questions coming in chat. As I said, if we don't get time, we'll respond to them in written format with the slides as well. So we're moving now to Council's budget and council tax. And we welcome our new Deputy Chief Executive, Jane Pickering. Morning, Jane.
Morning all. Thank you. So thank you. The first slide. So just to really repeat what's already been said, the uncertainties that we have around the pandemic naturally is affecting local government finance as well. So I'm really sorry. I wonder if everybody could put themselves on mute. I'm getting quite a bit of feedback. So yes. The government has told us that 21-22 will only be a one-year settlement again, and that's really on the back of certainty. I'm sorry, I don't know if everybody else is getting that. No, just me.
Yeah, there's some background. Sorry, Jane. I'm trying to get hold of 497594028 and ask if you could go on mute, please. If you click into your screen, bottom left. So your name's not on the screen, it's just a number. If you could just go on bottom left.
Okay. I'll continue anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
So we are going to have a one-year settlement, which is a difficulty. It's an uncertain position, and I know that is for all of the businesses that we have across the district as well. And also the government has confirmed that any of the spending reviews, so any changes that they're going to do in terms of the wider national government finance and local government finance, they will now be looking at from 22-23 onwards. We have been allocated grants, which has been very helpful for the district. Dom's already talked about the business grants that we've had, but we've also been given grants to deal with the effect of the costs associated with the pandemic, but also some of the shortfalls in income. So not all of our shortfalls in income, for example, the car park, where we've closed the car park charges, we haven't had full compensation of that, but we've had partial compensation. For next year, we've also been given additional new house bonus, which is very helpful, but also that's with investments across the district. But again, it will help our recovery from the pandemic. Business rates, at the moment, we're well above the baseline that the government have said, here's where we think we need to be in terms of business rates. We're above that, so that is benefiting us as a district, and it also therefore benefits our community, enables us to keep our council tax low. But the government have said they will review that, and they will probably reset it, so we will lose any of that additional growth. We do have a balanced budget, and I say balanced, I'll come on to that in a moment. We do need to set aside money for reserves to ensure that we are funding ourselves for the future. We do see quite significant deficits. Next slide, please. So we aren't now looking at the business plan until 22-23, and that's really because of the effects of the pandemic. And you will see that we will be changing some of the promises that we can't actually deliver in that year that we first thought we could. So we will be having some minor revisions of the council promises, which we'll be looking at the February executive board. But we'll still be looking as a council at no cuts to services and the aim to minimise council tax. Next slide, please. So we have a net revenue expenditure across the council of £14.9 million. That's all of the district services side. There's a number of financing areas that you can see. The big ones there are council tax, £6.7 million. Also looking to use some of our reserves, about £2 million. Government grants of 1.8, And we've actually got a surplus at the moment of 2.2 million, and that does sound quite significant, but I have put a highlight at the bottom. We are looking to transfer those to general reserves, and that will fund future year deficits on business rates and other pressures that we might have. We do have a deficits of over £1 million for the next years of our money plan, and we need to ensure that we are funding that moving forward. So whilst it looks like a healthy surplus, we are having to set that aside for future questions within the council. Next slide, please. Thank you. New homes bonus. The new homes bonus doesn't sit as part of our general balance in our general revenue. We do set that aside every year, mainly for what we have within the legacy fund, but also more importantly, some of those district investments that I've talked about. And those will constantly ensure that we have, as a council, money moving forward to improve the community and improve the assets, and look to purchase investments, invest in various projects across the district to improve things for businesses and our community moving forward. Thank you. Next slide, please. So where I talk about a balanced budget, between that surplus of just over £2 million, we'll have a balanced budget once we go through the various council meetings, because of course it's in the councillor's gift to make those decisions around where the budget reserve sits. We have made prudent assumptions on business rates growth, and again looking at what the last 12 months, the impact of those on our businesses. We've looked at growth reducing really from 2 million to only £250,000 a year, which is a concern. We have reduced our car parking income for about 25% for 21, 22 only, because as you can see, our car parks are free at the moment, and we did do that even when the businesses were back open to try to the centres. New homes bonus, as I've already mentioned, we put that money into reserve to help our investments. We do have the Evesham, the Waitrose, we have improved investment income, and we're always looking at opportunities, which is unusual for district council, always looking at investment opportunities to improve our income, so we don't rely on the council tax base so much. And as everybody has, we have uncertainties over the financial impact of the pandemic moving forward. So next slide, please. So our council tax is about £1,800. Of that, only £120 is the Whithaven district element. The majority of it is the county council element, but also we have amounts for police and for fire, and also whichever parish that you're sitting in, there'll be an element for the parish council charge. We can increase by 2% or £5, and within my report as the officer for the council, I have assumed that we will be increasing council tax by 2%. That's what's in the current budget report, but absolutely that's in members' decision and in their hands to make that decision at the full council meeting in February. And for the last 3 years, members have agreed and approved that they would freeze Whithaven's share of the council tax, so it has sat at that £120. And final slide, please. Thank you. Just really giving businesses some awareness of the investments that we're looking to make from sort of 2019-20. So we have a sort of 5-6 year programme through to 25-26. And you can see we've got some really great £5 million on leisure improvements, 3G improvements, cycle tracks, etc. We've also got disabled facilities grants to help people in their homes of 15 million. Also looking to invest in Valpar, Worcester 6, and more recently Evesham Public Hall, that we're hoping to have a really great community asset over at Evesham to again improve the town and improve what facilities people have within the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and you caught us well up on time, so appreciate that. Good things. Tracy, because we've completed the slides, are you able to take the slides down so we can see everyone, which is great. Thank you all to the speakers there. I'm now happy to open up to questions. There were a few in chat, but hopefully Dom covered most of those off in summary format as part of the business rates session. I did ask for blue hands, but I'm quite happy to try and look through screens. So if anyone wants to physically put their hand up, I'll try and call you in if you wish to ask a question. So I'll go through the screens. Some people are not on video, so you'll have to use chat or put your screen on if you want to ask a question. Any questions coming forward?
Hi.
Jay Evan, is it?
Jeevan, yeah.
Jeevan, sorry.
Yeah, so I run a local pub, and during obviously, like, you know, when we had our social distancing procedures and whatnot, and the rule of six, I had a marquee outside. Now the marquee we had all open, heated, so it's really inefficient in the sense of, like, you know, we're blowing heat through it. But I wanted to know what the council are doing in terms of relaxation on planning, because the whole reason why we've got the marquee is so we can space people out even more. People can operate as under the rule of six, and, like, you know, have separate tables, and we're doing it mostly for the safety of our customers. It's not making us any extra money, and it's safer than operating indoors. And I just want to know what thoughts, because I know other councils have put a temporary. They've said they've allowed it. Like Melton Council said, you allowed a marquee until the whole pandemic's over. We won't require planning or anything like that. What is Whitchaven doing? Because I haven't seen anything at all apart from a relaxation until the 16th of January. But we are trying to plan long term, because we don't feel like this is going to go away anytime soon. But we want to try and make things better for when things eventually open, and just make things nicer. But obviously, everything just feels like a temporary structure at the moment.
Okay, Jeevan, thank you for that. That's a really good question. And with all the businesses here, I really congratulate you on your creativity and your enthusiasm to try and get trading as well as you can. I'll pass the question, if I can, to either Phil or Vic. I don't know if either of you can answer that.
Phil here. It's a planning question, isn't it? And
yeah, largely.
Yeah, I would certainly take the view that I would be very optimistic that planners will be fairly flexible at the moment. But I think what you're saying is you're looking at, I don't know, put words in your own mouth, but for the rest of the year type things, and not something over the next few months, but longer term, Jeevan.
Because the marquee is rented, so it's very expensive. Even now, with mobilisation and demobilisation costs, it's looking like we're better off keeping it up rather than getting it dismantled and erected for when we can eventually open.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a case that
can I suggest? Yeah, we aren't planning officers on the meeting this morning, but I think you raise a really valid point. That we do have a meeting later this morning, and with our executive board. It's probably a good question to sort of raise and take views on that.
Jeevan, if I can, it's Richard again here. Because I know about Droitwich Rugby Club, and Droitwich Rugby Club do have a marquee up as well, and it is to support spacing and COVID. And they did check with the planning team, with the planning officers, just to make sure that they were okay to do it. And they also checked with WRS, Worcestershire Regulatory Services.
We have
and,
before, yeah.
Yeah, and they got agreement in the interim to operate both. So you asked for relaxation of guidelines. That's exactly what we want to do to encourage business. I can see Vic wanted to come in.
Yeah, so. just to echo what Phil said, I think our planning colleagues have been and will be as flexible as they possibly can during this period. What I will suggest is if Jeevan leaves his details, we'll get back to him with a specific answer. So we'll get a planning colleague to talk to him. But you know, I think we've been quite proactive.
We did have a planning officer visit the site, and we have got a letter to say that we will be reviewing this mid-January. Until then, don't worry about anything. But we're past mid-January now, and I want to know if I have to worry whether I have to get it taken down, or because what I do want to do is just decorate it a little bit, just because at the end of the day, it isn't a marquee. We're in depressing times, and I'm just trying to make the atmosphere a bit better, a bit of lighting, a bit of this and that. Obviously, this is stuff I have to buy in.
Jeevan, I'm with you, and I'm sure Jane Dobson, who's administering the call, will ensure that she's got your details, and we will get back to you. I'm sure we will work with you to relax the rules a little longer, if at all possible, and want to encourage your business like all businesses. Thank you, Jeevan. Any further questions? Any further hands? Sorry, Richard Whittle. Hi, Richard. Morning. You need to go off mute, Richard. I wanted to say that.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Just a quick question on town centre planning and development and help in the town centres. is there any thought being put into doing free car parking for the first 2 hours, as opposed to going back to charging from the minute you park your car? Because I believe that that is one of the biggest obstacles to town centres and shopping in town centres. We're under great pressure from out of town centres, which we've now got a couple round right, which is not helping town centres.
Well, Richard, I think you know that we've given commitment from Wychavon to offer free parking until the end of lockdown 3, and whenever that is. And I'm sure we will have discussions to see what else we need to do to support businesses get up and trading after that as well. As we say, we want to get back to flourishing economy and flourishing businesses. So we will endeavour to do what we can to support that.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay. Tracy, I like your dog, by the way.
Richard, I think Debbie Broadway, I think, was signalling, if I'm not mistaken.
Sorry, Debbie.
It's okay. All it is, what are the rules about click and collect for shops? Because they're quite unclear.
I think that probably is a bit of a grey area, Debbie. I don't know, Phil, if you've got any knowledge on click and collect. It's run by WRS really for us, isn't it?
Well, they would certainly review the approach to it. I think the government's guidelines does include click and collect is an activity that retailers can do. So I know there's been quite a bit of chatter in terms of particularly with this lockdown of discouraging sort of non-essential journeys. So there's a little bit of a conflict between those two, but my understanding is that as a retailer, you're able to do that within the guidelines.
But how does it actually work? I mean, from my point of view, obviously I'm a shop. I do wool and fabric, and from my opinion, it helps with mental health, because obviously a lot of these people are stuck at home. They've been told they can't come out. Okay, they have to be safe if they do come out, but in the summer, everybody was doing the gardening and making banana bread. Now, because of the weather, they aren't actually out in the garden. So, are you allowed to serve somebody on the doorstep?
No, I believe not on that. I think it is one that literally people do need to have made a purchase in advance and then pick up those items. So very much is dependent on your online presence or your social media presence.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's where I know where you're looking for support, Debbie, on that. So WRS would manage click and collect. If you go on their website, they could clarify, I'm sure, some of those points.
Okay.
Thank you, Debbie. We have a question in chat from Angie Crump. What incentives are being offered to new retailers to come into the high street? Another one for you, Phil, probably, or Sean. What incentives are being offered to new retailers to come into the high street? That's obviously looking at vacant properties, I guess, and trying to fill them up.
I think one of the changes is with new business startups now is the fact that with our funding, these startup training courses and the bit of grant funding for people looking to set up shops will be supported. The previous schemes excluded sort of business to customers type bit. So that I think is a really positive move that's been made to encourage that activity on it. I have to say, I think business rates clarification in terms of what the government's approach to retail in the future is quite critical, because we know business rates is quite a big part of a business cost. But it is that reminder that the commitment to the small business rate relief still exists and has been long term on that. But we just to clarify, we are doing these town centre prospectuses for all the 3 towns in Wychavon, and I think that will not just be a physical property changes within those town centres. I think it will be also reviewing the whole package of the environment in which activities take place in the town centres. So it will be a review of what's needed to help on the retail side, but also a recognition that town centres, where it's had a very much over the decades of focus on retail, retail may be less of a focus going forward, and there'll be a range of other activities on there. But I will push that business startup courses and grant funding that does exist, which will now include retail.
And businesses can contact us or Worcestershire Business Central for guidance on that.
Richard,
Phil,
can I jump in there?
Yeah, Bradley.
Thanks. Just pick up on that point and the question from Richard as well, because I think it's all a little bit interlinked. Phil's absolutely right about business rates, and there's long been talk about whether there'll be business rate reform and things like that from government. But from our side, it very much is about focusing on the prospectus. But I think we've got to be realistic, and we can't be in denial about this, about the amount of retail that town centres are going to feature in the future. You know, the dynamic is changing. The pandemic is entrenching new and changing shopping habits into people's lives. And for us, the focus is about attracting the right kind of investment. And to pick up on Richard's point about car parking, you know, historically, for a while, I think we've offered a buy 2 hours, get one free, which is kind of the reverse of what Richard's talking about. But we very much got a view that the key to town centre vitality is around the quality of the offer. I mean, I personally don't think that, you know, if you have parking free, that's going to change someone's view where they say, oh, actually, I'm going to go into that town. It's about the quality of the offer. And if we want our town centres to be sustainable in the longer term, we've got to get that right. And whilst there's, you know, a degree of, I think, pain and worry and uncertainty at the minute, we've probably got to accept that's going to be around for a while. We've got to ride that out, create that vision for the future to try and put them on a more sustainable footing going forwards. And for each town, there will probably be slightly different measures. I'll give you an example. For Evesham, you know, we know that traffic is a really acute problem there. So we held a transport summit a few months ago, and that brought together all the key stakeholders. And I know that in the press, you'll read a lot of stuff, or councillors have got together and discussed the problem, but what are the outcomes? Topics like that are slow burners. But, you know, we're sort of bringing the stakeholders together to try and make a difference. There will be no quick wins, but we've just got to be mindful of that and think about what the goal is. And the goal for us is about sustainability. And then we've got to work backwards from there and implement the tools to get that offer right, to put them on that, put the town centres onto that sustainable footing.
Cheers, Bradley. Sean, if there's people on the call that are not engaged with the town centre prospectus, is there still time and opportunity for them to do so, and how would they do that?
Yes, so there's an online survey that's available for anybody who's got an interest in the town centre to complete. They can get the link to that by going to our website. I'll make sure that links on there. But many people on the call would have already been engaged in the either the one-to-one or workshops such as we attended last night in Droitwich.
Brilliant. And if you're not, just email us and we will ensure that you are engaged.
Absolutely.
I know Richard Whittle, you're coming back.
Yeah, just taking Bradley's point on the car parking. Having worked in retail all my life, one of the first decisions we've always talked about, and one of the parts we've always discussed when opening new stores, is car parking, and the effect of having free car parking for a certain period of time, and the advantages that actually gives you. And if you take Droitwich as an example, Waitrose now refund the first hour of free car parking, and companies like that won't do it if there isn't a benefit. And to me, if you want to regenerate a town centre, that has got to be part of the planning, personally. And this last few weeks where we've had free car parking, you know, people have used it, and it's helped the retailers tremendously, those that have been allowed to stay open. So I just think that should be on an agenda somewhere.
Okay, and hopefully you're engaged with the town centre prospectus, Richard, as well. Okay, any further questions? Any raising of hands? Go through to the second screen.
I can't see any more hands, Richard.
No, I can't either. Okay, well, we're just over time anyway. What I'd like to do is thank all the speakers this morning for their contribution. I really appreciate that. I'd like to thank the Economic Regeneration team, Chris and Dom for the grants, and from the team for supporting them. Tracy for controlling the slides, and Jane Dobson for setting the meeting up. We will look to do more meetings. We know this is a critical time for businesses, and we want to retain that dialogue. If you have any issues at any time, do converse with us. We are here to support you as much as we can. So if there's no final questions, I will wish you all well and congratulate you on what you've done. And we really do support you in the endeavours and the efforts moving forward. We know it's difficult times, but please stay safe and we will get there. So thank you. Probably a few people that have walked away.
Yeah. Still, I can end it. I can end it all for all of us.
Do you want to end it then, Tracy?
Tracy,
Yes.
you've got it on recording, but we're going to respond to the questions. I know we tried to in the call, but we've got them as well.
Yeah, the chat should record as well.
So will you send the slides and the answers out? Is that the plan?
I think so. I think Jane's going to look at all that. So what I'll do, I can send the link to the recording link to everybody, and so you can access it, and then Jane will be able to, type up the questions.
Yeah, we can probably do it through the business news, can't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you all.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.